Hello, hello, and welcome to Thrive Through Turbulent Times. I'm so glad that you have joined us, whether you're joining us here live or you're joining us in the replay. So thrilled you're here. And maybe this is your first masterclass, and maybe you've seen several others, but no matter where you are, we're so thrilled that you've joined us for this journey. And we've got at least 21 days and probably close to almost 30 speakers, lots of fun, some bonuses, some gifts. And this is one of our bonus sessions for you. So grateful that you could join in. And I'm going to be introducing this incredible lady to you today. And it is such a delight that I get to do so. She is a high performance coach. She's a high energy, high performance coach, as a matter of fact. And she is the founder of Crown Yourself. And I love that name because some of us are waiting to be crowned the king and queen in our world. I was like, who's going to do that? Us, right? So I think it's such a brilliant name, and it says so much. She is an international speaker. She's an award-winning screenwriter. She's wickedly talented. And she has also, in the last few years, she is in the mompreneur space, and she's got another little bambino on the way. So it is my pleasure from Australia, another one of our global people. We've got so many from all over, but it is my pleasure to introduce to you Kimberly Spencer. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me, Brenda. And you will notice that I am not Australian by my accent. I just live in Australia now.
Yes, important detail, but she's in a lovely place in Australia, living the life, living the dream. So we're thrilled that you're here.
I am so happy to be here.
Those of you for those that don't know you, and I know some of the people do and have experienced your work in different ways and in different forums, but for those that haven't, can you tell us a little bit about some piece of your story, what brings you to where you are now and the work that you're doing and into your perspective on thriving?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times we expect that there's like one turbulent event, one like big giant thing that finally the skies open up and the angels sing and you have the clear path and the clear vision. And that wasn't exactly what it was for me. While I had some bigger, angel singing moments throughout my life, and that led me to being able to literally live our dream abroad in Australia. We chose to stay here back in March because we were able to, and my business was in a place to be able to do that. And now my husband gets to go to culinary school, and we get to birth our babies here in a place where it's like totally safe. And my son gets to have a normal life. Like, this was always the dream that my husband and I set out to live 8 years ago when we first got together. But about 5 years ago, I was part of an e-commerce company. And I was 3 months before I was supposed to walk down the aisle to go marry my husband. My partner said, "I want to buy you out." And this was like right after getting in talks with angel investors, pitching to the first round of Shark Tank. Like, we'd gotten our product featured in New York Times Square. And like, I thought, like, this is it. This is finally going to take. And then suddenly I get hit with this massive crushing ego blow in a way. And then get to have the privilege of dealing with lawyers for 3 months. And if you've never dealt with lawyers before, they don't send you the kindest emails. And so I dealt with this for 3 months leading up into my wedding. We signed the buyout agreement 3 weeks before I got married. And I was on my honeymoon wondering, okay, this is beautiful. Italy's amazing. What do I do when I get home? Because I'd spent 2 years of my life as the president of this company, and suddenly I didn't know what to do. And after way too many espressos, my husband, like, I was chatting with my husband, who's been my brainstorming buddy forever and for as long as we've been together. And I leaped off the couch and I said, "Crown yourself." And my husband's like, "What's that?" I was like, "I don't know, but it combines the body. It combines business. It combines health. It combines fitness. It's high performance it's a holistic coaching experience." And I was so ready to like dive in. The problem was that those 3 months really set off a lot of former and past trauma alarms from my developmental years. Growing up, I grew up with an addict for a dad who recently passed. And that experience kind of trained, like my body and my brain like were not functioning at the same time. Like I wanted to have all these big goals, but I was so scared. Suddenly I had all these limiting beliefs pop up. And one of the things that had made me successful in the past was I would make these audacious asks. Like I would audaciously ask to just write a feature film to the director and get it. I would audaciously ask, instead of being a consultant on a fitness product, to become a partner in the company. Like I would make these audacious asks, but the problem was that after 3 months of dealing with lawyers and having everything called into question, my integrity, my capability, it really hit at those deep-seated core subconscious beliefs of not being enough, not deserving, the fear that everything would get taken away from me, the fear of rejection. And so I dabbled, and I had about 1.5 years where I was just kind of playing in my business, where I was in the space of what I call productive procrastination, where you're doing all the things and it looks really good from the outside. Maybe you even have a business card that says CEO on it, but you're really the president of absolutely nothing. And I had a website and I posted content occasionally, but I had no products and services. I was so scared to actually sell myself. And I had all of these limiting beliefs that were clouding my ability to put myself out there. And then the skies parted, the angels sang, and I found out the best news and the scariest news of my life was that I was pregnant. And that the title of mom specifically scared me more than any other title, because I knew that the person who was dabbling, the person who was stuck in productive procrastination, the person who had a mindset where I was constantly complaining, I was constantly blaming other people for my life and my circumstances, suddenly, and the person who was just mired in fear and doubt and literally drowning in doubt, I knew that that was not the person that I wanted to raise my child. And I knew that in that moment that I had to change my identity, that I had to change who I was, because who I was not someone who I would want to be the mother of my child. And so I immediately signed up. I added $5,000 of extra credit card debt to the $35,000 I already had to sign up for a coaching program, to sign up with my first coach. I got certified in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. I said, I am going to figure this mind out, because I knew I had to figure the mind out, because I knew that I'd reprogrammed my mindset from actual bulimia 10 years prior. And what I was stuck in was a phase of almost like business and financial bulimia and turbulent times in that way. And I knew that I'd done it before with no psychological and medical intervention. So I knew I could do this again. I just didn't know how to find those subconscious patterns and strategies, because sometimes you can't see the other players or those other beliefs when you're in the game, when you're on the field. And that's the benefit of having a coach or having someone who has perspective, or coming to summits like this that Brenda's put on that give you different perspectives to be able to unlock little tweaks. And especially, I always equate beliefs being like a safe. Like there are some that are really easy to crack open, like a piggy bank. Like they're not that hard. It's like a belief of, I don't know if I can open this jar of peanuts. Well, eventually you can turn the lid enough times or hit it with a spoon, and eventually that lid comes off. So it's not a really hardcore belief. But a deep-seated belief, like a belief that comes from fear of not being enough, fear of not deserving, or fear of not being worthy, those ones can be like Fort Knox sometimes. And so sometimes they take hearing the same thing in different ways from different people, from different perspectives, for having different experiences that unlock that belief, that automatically allow for that safe to be cracked open. And that's what this did for me. And so eventually I went from not selling any products and services to suddenly selling coaching. After I got my first client, I quit my day job. I was teaching Pilates. I said, I'm done. And I'll touch on a bit on that later. And then I moved on from there and have now been able to grow a successful business that I absolutely love, that's allowed us to now live our vision.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I hear a lot in there. That one of the things that really resonated, the productive procrastination. How many of you that are watching and listening can relate? Like, ooh, we can be super busy but it's distracting busy. It's not the type of productivity. And it's what I refer to kind of as that swirl that a lot of people are talking about and have in the last years, that they've caught up in the external environment swirl. And then also it's created a bit of our own internal. And I like to, Kim, what you said, that as you were coming back from your honeymoon and kind of going, okay, well, what's next? That in that space, and also from the experience with the lawyers, all that started bringing up those limiting beliefs, those all of that inner voice, not the friendly voice, not the kind voice, but that inner critic that is like, who are you? Or what are you going to do? Asking all of the things that aren't supportive, that just add to that swirl that we've got going on. And so that what next, and in that huge vacuum, what are we going to do? And I think that you've touched on a piece, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, is very much the belief. What do we believe about ourselves? And I'm hoping that part of what we're doing in this series is that we are giving some keys, or at least we're giving a couple of turns on that jar, that really tough nut to crack, some of the really sticky ones that have been getting in the way. And it's at the foundation, and it's at the core. Because what I see also, and I know, Kim, you've seen this too in your practice, is that you see people, they're like, okay, well, metaphorically, it's like, I want apples on my tree, and I'm going to take the tree that I have that's producing oranges, and I'm going to pull all of the apples off. And now I'm going to go through the process of taping on oranges. And then look, oh, I've got an orange tree. No, you don't.
Yeah.
So we spend too much time trying to change out here when we've got to get to the roots.
Yeah, you got to uproot that tree. And I think the thing that I found really about productive procrastination is only you know what that is, because I can't tell you, and no coach or mentor can, if what you're doing is productive procrastination, but only you know that, because the needle mover of what it constitutes productive procrastination and what constitutes momentum and activities that actually produce movement and results and transformation is courage. And so, when your head hits that pillow every night, if you leaned into an act of courage or you didn't, only you know. I mean, for me, I found that, getting a nice logo and getting a website, I thought, oh, those things. No. The one act of courage that I had to make was putting myself out there and making an offer for a sale. That was my act of courage, but that isn't necessarily everybody's. So what is the act of courage that you need to be taking that is that thing that maybe you've been delaying on? And sometimes productive procrastination can come in the form of throwing money at a problem. It can come in the form of delaying on taking action on that creative project. It can come in so many different forms. The throwing money at a problem was a surprise one for me, but one that I found that through the years of coaching high performers and 6 and 7 figure business owners, that one is very, very common, especially amongst high achievers. Well, let me just throw money at it. Let me just hire somebody for that. I don't want to deal with it. That's fine. That may work. That may be the act of courage, is hiring someone, but maybe it's not. It just depends on what that resonates for you as what is that act of courage.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I know for me that I get really productive around the house. When I'm up against something, the house is never more clean. The house
it's so clean. Oh my gosh. When I was going through my whole buyout process, that our apartment was sparkling, and I did like a salt energetic cleanse on it because that's necessary as well. So
and it's so tangible.
It was being productive.
It is being productive, and it's easier because it's tangible, because some of these pieces that we're working on, they're the internal pieces. It's the inner game work that we're doing. And sometimes it can feel elusive, and certainly it can feel incredibly uncomfortable, right? It seems like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go in and start to explore some of these ideas and some of my beliefs. And it's like, oh, it can be tricky business.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for sure. because no one really likes to look in the mirror and see Dorian Gray looking back. Like we don't like to see the things that we don't like to see about ourselves. And sometimes it's hard to even see that. Like that's I mean, I've been so blessed to have so many fantastic coaches over the past 4 years that have shown me perspective of things that I didn't even recognize, that I didn't even see. Like one of my coaches, we were working on influence as high performance coaching. We have a structure in one of the sessions is on influence. And so I was getting coached by a fellow high performance coach. And I was listing off all these people in my life that I thought were super influential to me. I said, oh, it's my husband, it's my mom, it's my kid. And then I mentioned my dad, and my voice just changed. And now my relationship with my dad had a lot of complexities to it. But in the end, my dad was always my greatest teacher. And had it not been for that perspective shift, now I get to look at the beautiful legacy that he left in my life that I get to carry on, of all the complexities of the lessons that I've learned. But it's because of that shift. That shift was a game changer for me to be able to look through that lens of teacher instead of addict, which changed the game for me.
Yeah. Where you're able to see this is here if you choose to serve, but it does require our perspective change. It requires us to look at something differently, because we can't go to the addict and be like, okay, you need to change. We need to set boundaries. I mean, there's a lot to go on in someone recovering from that space. And I've worked with a lot of people in that space. So it's not to say that there isn't the opportunity for them to grow and to change, but for us is to expect that is, I don't think is appropriate or fair. And it lets us get out of our own work, because like there's two people in this dynamic or in this relationship. And so how can we look at this and say, okay, what might I do differently? What might be going on inside of me where I can look at this and say, there's something for me to learn. There's a place where I can use this to expand, or I can use this to contract and get smaller. And it's not easy by any means, but it is a shift in the way we look at something.
And it's a powerful one. It's a tiny little shift, and it's one of the questions that I commonly ask, and it's my tool is, are you operating from fear or are you operating from faith? It's a very simple question, because I like to think of it like when you're operating from faith, you're driving toward the destination and the thing that you want to be going toward. When you're operating from a place of fear, you're driving toward the destination and the thing that you want to be going toward while looking in the rearview mirror. You're checking if the cop cars or the sirens are coming behind you. You're checking for that thing that might show up, for the other shoe to drop, for that sneaky belief, for the rejection to come. You're constantly looking. There's like a vigilance that happens when you're operating from that space of fear.
Yeah, or you've got 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot on the brake and just...
Yeah. Well, because I mean, that's how else would you drive forward? Looking in the rearview mirror, you'd crash. So many people do. So fear and faith are both they're solid subconscious strategies to motivate us. I mean, we've seen there are some people who have that perception that, oh, because of, my growing up or because of this experience, I'm never going to allow that again. And so they constantly push and they hustle and they move the needle forward, and they get momentum, they get away from that thing that they don't want to be. But the problem is they're still looking at the thing that they don't want to be. They're still looking at that thing that they're scared of becoming. So that thing that they're scared of becoming is still motivating them to move forward. Well, that works for a short time. I like to think of this as I know that you've had a couple other experts on the vagus nerve and different nervous systems. I like to think about this from a physiological standpoint, because I was a Pilates instructor for 10 years. So being able, because when you're starting a career in Hollywood, you need a bridge job. But I love Pilates, and Pilates was one of the things that led me into being a high performance coach, because I saw the power of the mindset. And so if we think about this fear versus faith it's not really a versus, it's just two separate things. It's not that one is good and one is bad. But if
Well,
you were to think about this, oh, go ahead.
can we just, for a second, for those
Yeah.
that might be like, ooh, faith, what do you mean? Because I know that we've got people who are spiritual, not religious.
Yes.
So I think that piece, to just clarify the faith for piece, please.
Yeah. So I don't use the word faith as in terms of like religion or God. I use the term faith as in a faith in your ability to figure things out. So a faith, and that is something that is cultivated, and that is a confidence that is cultivated through courage, through acts of courage. And so a faith in your ability that you can get to a destination that you set for yourself. And we've all had goals that we've probably fallen short of, but we've all had things that we've achieved that were so easy for us to achieve. And when we look at our subconscious kind of success strategy, I like to look at the parallels between what was that thing that's so easy, so natural, so easy for you to kind of manifest into your world, and how did you do that? And that's where the faith comes in, is a faith in your ability to get to a destination. So I mean, for this I've used people's ability to get to a destination of an orgasm in bed. I've used people's ability to get to the destination of, birthing a child. People's ability to get their to achieve any sort of financial goal. But every one of us has achieved at some level something that has allowed us to start cultivating that faith. That sometimes that's something that I do say it does need to be cultivated, because sometimes we don't recognize it. A lot of times because it came very easy for us to achieve that one thing. Maybe it was a weight loss thing. Maybe it was relating to someone. Maybe that's your superpower. I find that faith kind of comes from that genius zone area. So does that clarify faith?
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah. So it's not coming from a religious standpoint at all. So if we were to take these two ideas of fear and faith and like bring them into the metaphor of our body, we have two types of nervous systems. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight, and we have our parasympathetic nervous system, that is our rest and digest. And so if you were to think of the parallel, and I love this parallel, and I'm borrowing it from Peter Crone, so I'm giving credit where credit is due, that the sympathetic nervous system, it does operate from that fear, and it's really great like anaerobic exercise. So if you're familiar with anaerobic exercise is like Usain Bolt. It's short length, high intensity sprinting. It's like you can go all out. And that's what fear is like in our bodies. It is, you can push, you can like really, like you can hit that gas pedal hard while while looking in the rearview mirror, because you are just looking to get away from that thing that you don't want to be or don't want to do. And so you can hit that gas pedal hard, but it only works for a short amount of time to be able to get you away from that thing, where eventually you have to turn your vision around. You have to turn and look in a different direction. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest. So this is like operating from faith and love and from joy. And so eventually to tap into that, we want to be tapping into that almost aerobic exercise, where it's longer in length, longer intensity. Think of marathon running. So we've heard that like life is a marathon, not a sprint. Well, in some cases, you do need to hit that sprint and like hit that gas hard and like run away from that situation that you don't want to be in. And in other cases, it's turning the vision to be in that space of longevity, of playfulness, of joy, of love, of being able to cultivate that vision, that faith, and pointing your goals in that direction instead of the fear of what has been. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. We've got to make that shift. And there's a time and place for each. There's a time, like you say, there's a time and place where we've got to really kick it in, afterburners on, all the rest of that, and go for it. And then there's a time where we've really got to be able to shift, like what I call the long burn, the long and slow burn. It's like one of them is cotton candy. Like it's poof, and it's gone. And then you've got protein, which is going to be long term and it's going to be sustainable. And so it's like, yes, we can do cotton candy, but if we did cotton candy all the time, right, it's going to cause
it would be diabetes.
Yeah, we have some issues, right?
And that's a lot. What happens when people are constantly operating from that fear is that eventually that cotton candy, that those short sprints, we're not meant to run long distances at 26 miles an hour like Usain Bolt. We're not meant to operate on cotton candy and just burning glucose. Like, we are meant to, our bodies are literally, our physical bodies are meant to be able to dance and oscillate from the fear to the faith. Like the sympathetic nervous system is so great for, like, you're nervous about a presentation. Like, I was a little nervous about coming in because this is my first masterclass that I've taught since my dad passed last week. And I was a little nervous. So I had to check. I was like, there was a little bit of fear there, and I had to check that. And I had to say, okay, I'm going to allow for that fear to stimulate into doing what it is that I love to do, which is to teach and to inspire and to educate and to coach. And like that. So I allow the faith to turn that fear and oscillate back into that faith, into that vision, into that long-term love and joy. But it's about the oscillation. Our bodies we are oscillatory beings. Nature is oscillatory. So creation always follows destruction. Night turns into day, day turns into night. Everything in nature oscillates. What happens is if we're stuck in a motivation strategy of just fear, driving forward, looking in the rearview mirror, that's what causes burnout and overwhelm. And that can make traumatic times feel more traumatic.
Yeah, because it depends on what we're tuning into, because there's
exactly
so much information that can come that can trigger us and trip us into that fight, flight, or freeze response. And last year we saw it over and over and over again with this unknown and all the different things that were happening in the job market, in our families, in our health, so many things. And so we were constantly being pulled at and perhaps triggered into that fight, flight, or freeze. And it's exhausting. And
it's really tiring.
Oh my gosh, the overwhelm. And just like, wait a second, you feel like you're sprinting a marathon every day, and it's not sustainable.
It's not a sustainable, like, our muscles need time to rest. Like the thing about that, I love using the body as a metaphor because it's so physical. Like when we can feel it in our bodies, we train our bodies. If you're training a muscle like weightlifting, you train it to failure. You train it to that point of failure, but you don't go back to the gym and do arms the next day. You wait a day or two to be able to allow it to rest and digest, to give it some love, to let it nurture itself on its own. So the same is true with our own motivation, with our own ability to achieve goals. Is we can go for that goal, but then, and if we achieve it, awesome. If we drive forward like while looking in the rearview mirror, we can still achieve the goal, but we also have to allow ourselves to rest and digest. And that's why I bring in constantly into my practice celebration of allowing yourself to really bask in the joy and rest in the accomplishment of what you've achieved. Because so often especially high achievers that I've worked with, they achieve a goal and then suddenly it's like, okay, well, next. And I'm like, did you celebrate that you just hit $500,000 with your team? Like, did you just celebrate that? Like, or did you just kind of bypass it and like let it just float away? Because the thing is that with achieving any goal, we have to train our bodies, just like with anything, to recognize the achievement so that we can recognize and celebrate. And that's how we build actually the muscle of fulfillment. Because because so many people, you can see high achievers who have achieved so much, things that you're like, oh my gosh, you totally should be happy. And they're not. Why? Because they probably haven't trained that muscle of fulfillment, of celebrating the accomplishments along the way. So they've constantly been hitting that gas while looking in the rearview mirror, and then not stopping to celebrate that they actually got to their destination. And that's what builds that lack of fulfillment.
Yes. Well, because
So
they think that happiness is getting something. I think
yeah,
we've all probably can identify with that. I
yeah.
know I certainly have. It's like, oh, when this happens, I'll be happy. And it's like happiness and fulfillment are two different things. And we'll have bursts and periods of happy, which depends, of course, upon our perspective and our lens. But fulfillment is a completely different thing. And stuff can be hitting the fan. And going nuts around us, things can be turbulent and in chaos, and we may not have everything that we need or want, but we can be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And the beautiful part about fulfillment is that it's an art to it.
mhm.
But like every art, it does require the practice of retraining your body, your brain, your reticular activating system to recognize those achievements along the ways of what you have been able to accomplish, of those times that you have been able to achieve, and to stop and celebrate it. And it doesn't have to, because, and here's the paradox with celebration, is that sometimes we achieve something that seems beyond our current identity. And your identity is very much like a thermostat. And your identity is composed of your beliefs, your thoughts, your feelings, and everything that you feel and think on a daily basis. So when you achieve a goal that's kind of beyond what your current identity is, maybe it's a financial goal. I've seen this very often with financial goals. You achieve this goal, and suddenly it's like, holy crap, I achieved it. I did it. But because it's not correlating with the thermostat of what you're so used to operating on, that's where self-sabotage comes in. That's where what Dr. Gay Hendricks calls the, in the Big Leap, he calls it the, I am losing my words for pregnancy brain. It's one of those upper limit problems.
Yes.
Where suddenly you achieve that goal, you see it, and you're like, holy crap. And you're it's almost like you're on this pedestal that you've put yourself on, that you've put this goal on, and you're like, this is really high. I'm not sure if I can sustain this. And then that's when we start questioning, and we actually go against what actually allowed us to achieve that goal in the first place. And the beautiful thing is that how can you make your successes, your achievements, and this is cultivating that muscle of faith and fulfillment. How can you make those seem normal? Celebrate them, yes. And the paradox, make them seem normal. Like, of course you just hit, your first $1 million year. Of course you did. Like, of course you just hired 3 team members in a pandemic. Of course you did. Like that's the paradox of building that faith and fulfillment muscle, is having the celebration, but also having it seem like your new normal.
Mm. Yeah, the normalizing piece. Right. We talk about normalizing some of the challenges, especially it's what's so beautiful when we're in community and we see other people and they share their story and you go, oh gosh, I thought I was the only one that was struggling with that challenge.
Yeah.
And normalizing and celebrating the achievements when we've hit the goal, so important, so that it doesn't feel like it's an outlier, that, oh, maybe we got lucky, or gosh, it was 1 in a million. And it's like, no, this is part of who you are, and adjusting your identity like the thermostat to be able to incorporate bigger and build your capacity for more.
Mm-hmm.
So important to normalize it, to celebrate it, really take it in and make that a full-bodied experience, so that it's not just an idea and a concept in our heads.
Yep. And the beauty is it can be cultivated by just finding where it lies in your body. You can find in your body where courage is. Like, if I were to ask you, and it's not through thinking, it's not like I think it's like over here somewhere. It's actually feeling. When you feel like you're doing, it's what in breath work we call a felt sense. And when you can feel it in your body, when you can have that felt sense of where does courage lie in your body. So for me, this is my own experience. When I experience turbulence, when I experience chaos, when I experience traumatic times, it gets stuck in my throat. Like, my throat gets like, it gets tight. Like this past week, I completely lost my voice. It gets stuck here. But I know, and I have certainty because this has happened time and time again, as soon as that passes and processes, when that feeling hits my gut, as soon as it hits my solar plexus, that is when I'm like, good luck stopping me. Like, good luck stopping me. But I know it has to work that process. It has to kind of sink in. It has to sink through the heart and be able to, like, for me, it has to process through the heart of like, how can I use this to serve? How can I use this as a teaching moment? How can I learn from this? Who can I become from this? And I start asking myself these questions. And I know that when it hits my throat, normally that is my fear talking. That's not my faith. Faith really for me, and certainty, that certainty that I said is that, like, I equate faith to basically being that certainty, because both faith and fear are the exact same thing. It's a belief in something that is not yet seen. Fear is just, sometimes there's some more evidence to support that may happen, that thing that you fear may happen. Maybe it was your experiences growing up. Maybe it was role models that you had. But fear tends to have a little bit more evidence rather than faith. Versus faith is that certainty that you can find in something that is not yet seen. But when you can feel that certainty and trust in your body, and when you know where that lands, it changes the game, for it allows you to use your body as a tool. Your body is one of the greatest and underused tools that we have. So being able to see, where does fear land? So for me, fear lands in my throat. It gets really stuck up in here. But faith and certainty really lives in my gut. And so when I can tell the difference when I'm making a tough decision in my business or with my kid, or, you know, choosing to stay in Australia in the middle of a pandemic in a foreign country. Like, I felt that decision, especially Australia, I felt that decision from my place of certainty of like, this is going to work out. This is scary, but it doesn't feel like it's choking me. It feels grounded and settled, like a good meal, like a really nice warm meal that my husband cooks. Because no one wants me in a kitchen. But but being able to find that certainty and trust. So where does certainty and trust live in your body? Because everybody's going to be different with what constitutes certainty and trust. So I've had some clients, they experience certainty and trust. It lives in their heart, and it lives right here in their chest. Others, it lives in their pelvis. Others, it's normally somewhere along your spine system or your chakra system. It's in one of those. Sometimes it's in people's forehead and their third eye. It just depends on you. So if you were to feel in your body, when you've made decisions in the past, a lot of times when you make a decision that comes from fear, it can definitely feel kind of like it's kind of collapsing in. Where in your body does it feel like it's kind of collapsing? Where in your body does it feel like it is retracting? And when you make a decision from faith, or from that certainty or trust, or from vision, where in your body does it feel like it's expanding? Where in your body does it feel like it's like really supported?
Yes. So for those, and maybe we can even take a moment to do this, and just to take that moment and see what you experience, because some people haven't built a lot of relationship yet with their body. And so they might go, I have no idea. I don't know where it lives. And like you said before, it's a cultivation. So we can start to cultivate and get quiet. So sometimes we've got to get quiet first so that we can hear, or we can feel. But there is a mechanism. Our body is designed to give us this feedback and to guide us. And when you make that choice between faith or fear, knowing, as Kim said so brilliantly, that they're both a belief in something not yet seen. So if they're both a belief in something we haven't seen, then that means we have a choice. And therein is empowerment, because it is a choice that we can make in any moment. And we can go unconscious, and we can get caught up in the swirl and the chaos and all that's going on. And the moment, though, that we can come back and go, oh, wait a second. Wow, okay, I'm feeling that fear in my throat, and it's choking me, or I can just feel like I get a headache because my thoughts are just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and go, oh, okay, the body will be a cue. So to listen to what are the things that are happening. And then that's the cue to stop and go, okay, great. Acknowledge what's there, acknowledge that maybe this is the fear side. And then in that space of quiet, where is the faith? Where is the courage?
Yeah. I mean, and I totally understand not having a felt relationship with your body, because I didn't have one for years. Like I was bulimic for 10 years. And the last place I wanted to be was inside of my body. So it took a practice of coming in and actually allowing myself to be in my body, as uncomfortable as sometimes it was, to feel what it was that would actually, where I would feel that faith. And a great exercise that I give is just to start activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Because so often, especially if you've experienced developmental trauma growing up, or if you've had any sort of big shocks like divorce, or parents divorced, or bankruptcy, or something happened with your job, or any, like, what's happened in the past and what's traumatic for you is what's traumatic for you. It's all personalized. So if you've experienced something in the past, it's kind of thrown you off. Like, sometimes being in your body feels like the last place you want to be. Like, because we don't want to feel those painful feelings. We don't want to feel the feelings of guilt or shame or anger or grief or sadness. But there's a process of allowing yourself to feel it, to be able to heal it. And so, like Brenda said, recognizing, okay, let me just sit with this feeling and feel where it is in my body. And okay, is that fear? Is that just, is that a fear of the pain that I'm scared of will be created, or will be there? A lot of times being in our body is, we'll be able to recognize when it's fear, because our breathing will start to become shallow. So your breath is a really powerful tool to be able to recognize, are you operating from fear or from faith? And so a great way to train yourself to find where faith and certainty lives in your body is just by activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which can be done in as simply as 10 breaths. So from here, I just saw a comment. So from here, we can just take a few minutes to just activate our parasympathetic nervous system and feel what that feels like to be in your body, and allowing your rest and digest nervous system to be firing. So parasympathetic breathing is simply in through the nose, out through the mouth, where your exhale is longer than your inhale. So if we were to inhale for a count of 4 and then exhale for a count of 6 to 7, I can count 6 to 7, then that actually is activating your parasympathetic nervous system. And it can do it in as simply as 2 minutes. So if we were to just breathe, how is your body feeling? And just notice it, because you just kicked on your parasympathetic nervous system. And if you're feeling a little dizzy from breathing at that intensity, then you can always inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose. That's a little bit more of a gentle breath. Other forms of exercise that activate your parasympathetic nervous system are Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. So practicing these forms of exercise can allow for you to start to retrain from a physiological level your parasympathetic nervous system, so your body's able to oscillate, is literally able to oscillate out of the fight or flight and into the parasympathetic. Because that, and when your body on a physiological level can do that, then as you can feel you'll start to gain a greater sense of that feeling, of that felt sense. And as you can start to feel that safety in being in your parasympathetic nervous system operating, then you can start to ask the questions of, okay, where does faith and certainty live? But sometimes when we're in that space of having been in fight or flight for so long, of having been in that sort of the short sprints, the driving forward, hitting the gas pedal, looking in the rearview mirror, sometimes that can cause our bodies to just like, we're in that fight, flight, freeze, where our bodies are literally in a space of freeze. So training it out of the freeze to allow for the oscillation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And then from that biological level, then being able to start feeling in our body once we're in our body, once we're in the rest and digest part of our body. Okay, where now does faith and certainty lie?
Yes, it gives us access to so much more when we engage that the rest and digest part of us, when we're able to open, when our body isn't scurrying and fighting and stuck in some version of survival, whether that's freeze or we're running constantly, or we go to fight. And you can see that sometimes too. And just are you getting a bit more testy with people at home, and when something doesn't go right and you get really sharp and get into it, so it shows up in a lot of different ways. And this is a way to start to bring us back and to start training our body, because again, our body is a great tool, as Kim is sharing, using that as a tool, as a gateway to getting more and more in touch with and training in more and more certainty and trust and faith and courage, so that we can continue to develop ourselves. And that also allows us to cultivate and thrive. Because thriving isn't about fixing everything else that's going on out here. It's that no matter what is going on out here, that we can create safety within ourselves, that we can create certainty and trust, and that know that we have handled everything that's happened up to this point, and continue to cultivate that trust and that courage, that we're going to be able to take care and achieve and accomplish going forward, and to thrive. So I'd love to get into some questions if we have them. And if there's anything that you wanted to share before we go into questions, Kim, are you ready for?
I'm ready for questions. Yeah. If you have any questions, bring them on.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do the questions. What questions do you have? I think
I
Kelly's
been 2 questions in the chat for you, Kim.
Awesome.
Leo had to leave, but before he left, one of the things he commented on was that sometimes turbulence is normal. Yes. And so then the question that he emailed me privately is, we've all been living through that with the pandemic. So what do you do when the turbulence is normalized in your life?
So that is where having that, this is where I would love to ask Leo a follow-up question of what are you doing to normalize turbulence? What are you, because here's the thing about turbulence is that there always is turbulence. It's before a result. Like sometimes things can feel like they're the most chaotic before things completely fall into place. There are so many idioms that I've heard that's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. But that's if you're choosing to see it as happening for you. And so there will always be problems, there will always be challenges, there will always be turbulence, but it's how you perceive that turbulence. Are you perceiving turbulence like a person who survived domestic violence and abuse? Their perception of normalization of turbulence is that it's just normal to be in a relationship where you're getting hit all the time. Now, is that healthy? Is that something that you actually should, quote unquote, normalize? Not necessarily. So how can you backtrack out of that normalization? Well, question, is this something that's serving my highest and best? Is allowing myself to be a part of this turbulence, to be swept up in this turbulence, allowing me to serve at my highest and best, and B, showing me at my highest and best. Because if it's not, then question the turbulence that you're allowing yourself to be swept up in, and question it and ask because I love questions. I absolutely love questions. And when you start asking yourself different questions, instead of why is all this turbulence happening to me? Because sometimes that can be the big question, especially in 2020 with the pandemic, and like, why is this happening? Why do I have to teach my kids from homeschool? Why do I have to, change my jobs? Why did this happen? Instead of asking that question, ask, how can I use this? How is this the best thing that ever happened to me? How can I use this to serve others? So the beautiful thing about turbulence is that it does give you, inside of turbulence, there's a beautiful opportunity. One of my favorite books on the planet is a book called What Do You Do with a Problem? It's a children's book. I read it to Declan, my son, pretty much every night. It's a whole series of what do you do with a problem, what do you do with a chance, and what do you do with an idea. But I love What Do You Do with a Problem specifically because it reiterates from a very, very simplistic perspective, because it's written for children, that inside of every problem lies an opportunity to learn, to grow, to be brave, to be courageous. So how, instead of allowing yourself to be swept up in the turbulence, how is the turbulence transforming you to be better? How are you allowing that? Because you get what you allow. So you can allow yourself to be swept up in the externality of the turbulence, or you can allow yourself to be transformed internally into someone who's focusing on something better, and into someone who's seeing this from a perspective of how can this allow me to serve, into how can this allow me to show up better as a parent? How can this allow me to be more present? Like, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things of this past week with my dad's passing, was it really allowed me to see from a beautiful perspective of how can this transform me for the best, highest, and best for everyone involved. How can I take the great parts that were amazing about my dad and carry those on as a part of his legacy, instead of just being stuck in the turbulence of the grief of just wanting to crawl under a pillow and just cry and hide. And it's in that space of asking those new questions of how can it allow you to serve, that you can separate being swept up in the turbulence and then allowing the turbulence to change you and to transform you into that phoenix that rises from the ashes.
And I know we've got another question. We'll open it up to others, but I want to acknowledge you, Kim, for the courage and for your example that you're showing here today. And when, she shared that her father passed just a matter of days ago. And when I reached out to her to say, hey, do you still want to do this? And I totally get it if it doesn't fit and if it's not the right time. And her response was so inspiring. And it's just an example of what she just shared. It's like she could use that situation to crumble and crawl under a pillow, and I wouldn't judge it. Like, I would get it and be like, yeah. And she's chosen, and we're so blessed because this is the first session that she's doing, and taking the courage and being real in it and offering that and being of service. And so it's such a beautiful example. And I'm so grateful. And I want to acknowledge that. And thank you so much for that. So that here is someone who is walking the talk. Here is someone who is doing what we're talking about. And that was one of the things that was so important to me when I put together this whole masterclass series, is I do not want people who are lecturing. I want people who have come through their own fires and have risen. And you know what? And we go through them over and over again. As you said in the beginning, Kim, it's not usually just one big thing. Yes, sometimes we have big things happening, but life is constantly going to be turbulent, have all kinds of things happening. And it's how do we choose to show up and be present in it and allow it to change us from the inside. So thank you.
Thanks,
thank you for that. Did we have another question, Kelly?
I do have one more, but I wanted to see if there was any from the group. If you have a question, guys, that you want to ask Kimberly or Brenda, just raise your hand, and I will put you in the spotlight with our two speakers.
Yeah, you can come off a video. Don't be shy. Maybe
Don't
it's a
be shy.
courageous, it might be a courage opportunity. Put on our little courage caps.
Mm-hmm. Or courage crowns.
Even better. There you go. Crown
Okay, so
yourself.
Mitchell, I'm going to read your question out. If you want to come off of, if you want to come off mute, feel free. Kimberly, Mitchell just sent a note, and basically the question that's embedded in there is, he's very goal. Looks like he's very goal driven, creating goals, getting things done, solving things, but he doesn't celebrate. So I treat completing the goal as normal, but is there a way to learn to celebrate? He said, I know rereading that sounds strange, but is there any ways that you recommend how we can learn to celebrate when we've achieved something?
Yeah. Look to your future self and those amazing things that your future self is doing. Like the reason why is it that you achieve that goal? So often many people set goals because they want to achieve freedom. Like that's one of the big ones that I see with a lot of entrepreneurs. They set these goals because they want to achieve freedom, but then they keep on setting more goals and achieving more, but actually feeling like they have less freedom. So if freedom is a high value for you, or whatever it is a high value for you, what could you do that's in celebration of that highest value for you? So freedom's a big one for me. So achieving a goal, I like to do something that makes me feel even more free. So maybe that's a vacation. Maybe that's a spa weekend. Maybe that is a nice romantic dinner out at some very shishi restaurant with my husband with no baby. Like it's totally what it is for you. But look at what it is that you value so highly that is the reason as to why you're driving toward these goals in the first place. And then see how your celebration can tie in with that value. Because for some people, it's popping a nice bottle of champagne. That's fine. For some people, it's celebrating with their team. For some people, it's celebrating with their community and really bringing their community in for like a book launch party, or celebrating with their team by taking them all out for manicures. That's what one of my clients did. But it depends on what is a high value for you. So what is that highest value that you kind of live by? And then what is a form of celebration? What is an example of that value being personified, being turned into reality for the reason as to why you're going for and doing what you're doing? Maybe it's just taking a day off and being with your family. Like that could be a celebration as well. So it just depends on what that high value is for you.
I'd also like to offer that within your highest value, bringing other people in. If you find yourself struggling to celebrate, it's not a habit that you've built yet. It's one that we're encouraging strongly a habit to build. So how do you set up those cues for yourself? And when you hit a target, like put little pings in your calendar that are going to be a reminder, but include other people. So you can declare publicly, here's my goal. And that creates some accountability, which is really helpful. But then you've also got other people who are rooting for you, who are on this path. And what's awesome is that then when you hit that, they can celebrate with you. And I had a person who hit a huge goal on Sunday. And it was funny because I asked, what are you doing to celebrate? And it was kind of like, I was like, okay, great. We're going to get on the phone. We're scheduling a phone call because we are going to party and dance with ourselves, or, on a screen, whatever, but I'm going to celebrate with you, and I'll lead it. I'll put on some music, whatever.
Yep.
So that we have that opportunity to really get it in our body. We can have a shared experience. So getting other people involved in the process to help you celebrate while you're building this habit will also be a great way to use what Kim's offering.
Yes. And I totally second what Brenda said. If you have a mastermind or a group of friends, or even people that you've met through this summit, that can be your like celebration buddies. So we all have, like many of us have accountability buddies to help us achieve that goal. But who's actually celebrating with us? Who are our celebration buddies that we can go to cheer on those gigantic wins? Because not only when you bring somebody into your celebration, like you make it seem possible for them too. So maybe you achieve something that they have yet to achieve, or that they're looking to achieve. Like one of my girlfriends, she just hit her first $1 million year. And I was like, cool, that's a goal that I'm going for. So that by me being able to celebrate it, it also brings it more into my awareness, into my subconscious mind, that it's possible for me too, because that it's so close to me. So having celebration buddies is huge.
Yes. So in the Thrivers Facebook group, come and celebrate with us.
Yes.
And I'll invite you in, to celebrate. And I don't care how big or small it is. Let's start with the small things. Hey, I got up and went to the gym today. Right? Great. Wonderful.
Rock on.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if you can actually go to a gym. Like I know we can in the Gold Coast, but not everywhere in America you can actually like get up and go to the gym.
Yeah,
sometimes that's a big, like when, oh my gosh, when the gyms opened here in the Gold Coast, I was like, oh, I'm celebrating this because I get my elliptical back.
It's funny, something that maybe we didn't look forward to for some of us. Now when we get unleashed and we can go back, it's like, oh, a little bit of a different perspective now.
Yeah, a little bit of gratitude, for it. I know, Kelly, that you said that there was one other question that someone had left.
Yeah. So one other question was, when you mentioned that you feel your fear in your throat, in your practice, do you notice that a lot of your clients have a tell, like they either get a headache or that they have a tell for fear, or does it sometimes move around as well?
The breath. Breath for sure. Okay. Breath is a huge tell, because naturally our bodies, when we start to feel fear, we start to have shorter breathing. And what I find is that when a client especially is feeling fear, that they'll start breathing into their shoulders. So you can feel the difference between deep diaphragmatic breathing, which is like more into the rib cage, and when you start in more fear-based breathing is more up in your chest and up in your shoulders. And so I start to see this. So a lot of times fear, I do see my clients have a lot of their fear is in their throat. But being able to have, like, you can see it from the breath. And sometimes people will try to escape that by not breathing. And it's very shallow and it's very up here. So a deepening of the breath, which is why I walked us through the parasympathetic breathing exercise, which for some, I mean, I've had clients that have had some serious developmental trauma in their past. I've worked with a lot of clients who have trauma in their past. And so it's actually in the first few sessions of doing some breath work and some deeper breathing, it actually is challenging for them to get that depth of breath because they're not used to having that much oxygen and blood flow to certain parts of their body, because they're so, like, what oxygen does is it allows for greater blood flow, but they're not used to feeling at that level because their body is something that they're so used to dissociating from. Mm-hmm. So the breath is a huge one. I mean, and especially most people that I find, they feel fear either in their throat, in their shoulders, or in their low back. Those are the most common areas that I've seen. If it's a fear of lack of being supported, typically that one's I find in the low back.
Yeah. And I want to second the breath and bringing additional awareness to it, because it seems so simple that it could just be really easy to just bat it away and think, oh, well, that's okay, whatever, my breathing. It's so it's a great mechanism. It's great for the feedback because we can start to feel if it's shorter, and it's also a great way to access and start to work with our body. So powerful. I had the opportunity to work with the US Navy, and I was doing a lot of training, and I was doing resilience training for the Navy. And the great thing is that there's a breathing exercise similar to what Kim is offering that I got to test and play with them. And I had 70 leaders for the Navy, and we had just seen the Navy SEALs doing their exercises. And I was like, okay, here are some of the most resilient human beings, in my opinion, on the planet, that endure grueling circumstances day in and day out with very little sleep, massive amounts of physical pain and mental challenge and psychological challenge. And how do they do what they do? And breathing. They have breathing as an important pillar of how they manage. So I offer that so that you understand that you can really do a lot with something as simple as the breath and how important that is. Awesome.
Yeah. It's such a simple tool, but a powerful one. I'm in the middle of Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk book. And he said that one of the first things that you learn as a monk is how to breathe, because We can go for days without food. We can go for days without water, but we can only go for minutes without breath.
Mm-hmm.
So the breath is such a powerful tool to be able to cultivate and use effectively, to be able to gauge your body and where your body is.
Yes. Did we have, I'm just aware of time, and for those of you that have to jump, totally understand. I want to give the opportunity for one or two more questions, and then we have a special gift for you all to share as well. So Kelly, were there any other questions, or did any of you want to come off of mute and ask a question live?
I don't have any more questions in the chat, Brenda.
Great.
If anybody wants to come off mute, just raise your hand. No, I think we're ready.
All right. Beautiful. Well, thank you for those of you that did share your questions. And if you have questions, bring them up in the Thrivers Facebook group. We're here. We're not going away. So we're happy to follow up as well. So Kim has very generously put together a little something as a special gift for you all. Would you like to share, Kim, what it is?
Yeah. So one of the tools that has been so powerful for me is, I talk about faith, but a part of faith comes with love and cultivating greater love for yourself, greater love for this body that we're blessed with, that is a powerful tool, greater love for the relationships in our life. And so I've created a love hypnosis. And the power of hypnosis is, because I get some people that get a little nervous about hypnosis. And so I like to say hypnosis is like, I mean, we get hypnotized from a Netflix show. So a state of hypnotic trance is just going into a deep relaxation state. So even that parasympathetic breathing exercise that I walked us through, that creates greater, deeper relaxation. So when we're in a state of deeper relaxation, we're actually able to absorb new messages subconsciously so much easier. That's why I always encourage my clients to be aware of what is the external programming, from the fiction that they're watching on Netflix to the podcast that they're listening to the news. What is the because those are all states of trance that we can all get into. Because especially if you've ever been in like watching Netflix, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, where suddenly it's like, oh well, just one more episode. Well, just one more episode. Well, that's us being in a state of trance. Well, and trance is hypnosis. I can't make you quack like a duck. I promise that this hypnosis won't make you do that, unless you really want to quack like a duck and that makes you feel more loving. Then rock on. But this hypnosis really is to tap you deeper into that love, that faith, that certainty that we all have inside of us, that can be that guide in turbulent times. And by tapping into that love, into that ability to find joy, into that perspective to shift from operating from fight or flight into operating from that more rest and digest, from a space of long-term thinking, from a space of vision, from a space of love, from a space of joy, from a space of play. That's the beauty of this hypnosis, is to help tap you in deeper. And so I recommend using this before you go to bed. About 5 minutes before you go to bed is when your subconscious mind is super malleable, and same with right when you wake up. That's kind of when your subconscious mind is super malleable as well, because you're in this you're in a different brainwave state than when you're up and about and thinking of all the things you have to do. So using this hypnosis, do not use it while driving or operating heavy machinery. There are solfeggio frequencies that are hypnotic frequencies in these. So definitely use this while like lying in bed in a comfortable space. It's only 5 minutes, but it's an easy tool to be able to use in the morning and in the evening to reprogram your mindset for receiving more love, receiving more connection with yourself and with others, so that we can all lift and support each other to thrive.
Beautiful. And what a fantastic way to close our session today. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for this beautiful time, for your generosity, for your courage, and for sharing. And for those of you that are watching, whether you're with us right now live or you are in a replay, what's one thing you can do today? As Kim said, how can you lean into courage? What is one thing that's going to move you forward, that's going to expand your life to creating a life by design, a life of your dreams where you can thrive? So I'd love, for those of you that are still here, we'll have you all come off of mute and say goodbye so we can all hear each other. If you want to come back on camera so we can see your faces as well, we'd love to see your faces and give you a nice little thank you for joining. Kelly put in the chat the link for your gift from Kim. We'll also have that on her speaker page when the replay is up, so you'll be able to access it there as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. So thrive on and thrive through.